Welcome, starlets, to the energy and temple of the Bone Mother. The scent is for death and embalming, opium against cypress, tobacco and spices. The magic is for the goddesses of bones, for the Morrigan, for Bive, for Laloba, for osteomancy, the throwing of bones and divination, and the death spaces, burying the old and rebirth, for ecstatic states of liminality, for madness and cursing. The Bone Mother. The knuckles crack, and as they open, the old bones scatter across a blood-red cloth. The fire dims and her eyes burn like coals in its reflection. She is the wisdom of ravens picking clean the bones from the battlefield, the sidewinders in the desert, the scent of embalming fluid on the air, secrets beyond death. Hail to the Bone Mother. Welcome back, starlets. So in this video, which is per request, we're getting back into the idea of putting some videos on YouTube, and I will be sharing them via Patreon and via YouTube as well. With this particular setup, we're going back to something that I used to do, which is showcase an energy, a product, but also weave that into a story, into a matrix, into a spell, give you some information about Bone Mother energies, Death Mother energies. What does that mean? So in front of you is a candle, the Bone Mother spell candle, that I manipulated the wax to make it look like bones. I witched it so it looked as though there was a shroud over bones, lots of movement within it, and you will have seen a reel of photos to begin the video, and the idea of that is to, well, give you a close-up. There's also incense and a spray for this, and it doesn't look particularly interesting as just an incense or just a spray, so you have the pictures that I've created for them, as well as an energetic imprint. So all of these images flowing through in the beginning of the video with a little bit of music, a little bit of heartbeat, and it brings that energy, that sense of what we're about to talk about, to the fore. Within this candle is 4,000-year-old red ochre from the caves of the Forest of Dean, and because I know the individual to whom this is going, a real crow bone. So ochre is this ancient cave substance that people used to paint with. You still can paint with it, and it has that deep earthy vibration to it. I wove in herbs of immortality and death, banishment and life force. This candle is a prayer to the Bone Mother, and you can hear her whispering if you pay attention. And then you have crow skulls made of wax that I made. So what are we talking about when we talk about the Bone Mother and who that is to witches? To me, the Bone Mother is kind of an archetype that covers many goddesses. She covers folklore, she covers energies within us, and she pertains to psychology as well because of this archetype. So I have come into contact with different explanations as to what the Bone Mother means, and you will find different examples of her across cultures, across stories, across folklore. Osteomancy, I mentioned, is bone throwing for divination, and using bones in magic and divination is a very old practice indeed. The Celtic version that really stays with me, because they use a fox bone, is they used to burn a fox bone and look at the cracks and the way the flame went through the bone in order to scry. There are many different versions of that from across the world, but that's the one that stays with me. The first time I ever came into contact, I think it's the first time, with a story that was outside of my own, was of La Loba, which is from Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And this story really stuck with me. It's a fascinating story that I have here. I have the book. There is an old woman who lives in a hidden place that everyone knows in their souls, but few have ever seen. As in the fairy tales of Eastern Europe, she seems to wait for lost or wandering people and seekers to come to her place. She is circumspect, often hairy, always fat, and especially wishes to evade most company. She is a crower and a cackler, generally having more animal sounds than human ones. I might say that she lives among the rotten granite slopes in Taha Humarara, Indian territory, or that she is buried outside Phoenix near a well. Perhaps she will be seen travelling south to Mont Alban in a burnt-out car with the back window shot out, or maybe she will be spotted standing by the highway near El Paso, riding shotgun with the truckers to Morelia, Mexico, or walking above the market above Oaxaca, with strangely formed boughs of firewood on her back. She calls herself by many names: La Jesuera, Bone Woman, La Trapera, the Gatherer, and La Loba, Wolf Woman. The sole work of La Loba is collecting bones. She collects and preserves, especially that which is in danger of being lost to the world. Her cave is filled with the bones of all manner of desert creatures, the deer, the snake, the crow. But her specialty is wolves. She creeps and crawls and sifts through the montañas, the mountains, and ararios, dry riverbeds, looking for wolf bones. And when she has assembled an entire skeleton, when the last bone is in place, and beautiful white sculpture of the creature is laid out before her, she sits by the fire and thinks about what song she will sing. And when she is sure, she stands over the kratira, raises her arms and sings out. This is when rib bones and leg bones of wolf begin to flesh out, and the creature becomes furred. La Loba sings some more, and the creature comes into its being. Its tail curls upwards, shaggy and strong. And La Loba sings more and more, and the wolf creature begins to breathe. And still La Loba sings so deeply that the floor of the desert shakes. And as she sings, the wolf opens its eyes, leaps up, and runs away down the canyon. Somewhere in its running, whether by the speed of its running, or the splashing of its way into a river, or by way of ray of sunlight or moonlight hitting it on the right of its side, the wolf is suddenly transformed into a laughing woman who runs free towards the horizon. So remember, if you wander the desert, and it is near sundown, and you are perhaps a little lost and certainly tired, that you are lucky, for La Loba might take a liking to you and show you something of a soul. So if you've never read Women Who Run with the Wolves, it's an empowerment book for women, and it talks about stories and folklore that is important to the author and the stories and messages that brings through. So these are stories, goddesses, archetypes that have something within the rereading of them, and how stories present themselves to us at such a time when we are looking for answers, we are looking to embody them, we are looking to make sense of the lack and the loss in our lives, or we're in pain, or we are feeling misdirected and something is missing, and maybe we feel like a bag of bones, right? So maybe we feel that we have lost the luster for life. We're wandering out in the desert and we don't know what we're doing. Nothing seems to really make sense in the way that we thought it would. There's all this kind of soul-searching energy to the folklore of the Bone Mother. So in this case, La Loba is bringing life from death, gathering all the misplaced parts and singing to them in remembrance and bringing back life. It's very much a rebirth story. The great thing about stories and folklore is that everybody will find different meaning in them, and you will find different meaning in stories each time that you interact with them. I find it interesting that she collects the bones of those which are often forgotten or mislabeled or maligned by humanity, and that kind of reaches to the story of the archetype of healing within the Bone Mother, that to those to who she appears have lost something. And that kind of ties into one of the second places that I ever read about the Bone Mother archetype outside of my own experience. We'll talk about my own experience in a minute. But the other one is from Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home, Toko Paterna, which is one of my favourite books in the whole world. And this book talks about the Death Mother. To those who have experienced the Death Mother, according to Toko Paterna, if you grew up feeling unseen, invalidated, or worse, with the unspoken communication that you were unwanted or wished dead, you may be the child of a woman possessed by the Death Mother. The Death Mother is a term for the energy or archetype that resents, abandons, and even wants to destroy her child. Death Mother was originally coined by Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz, and later fleshed out by author, teacher, and Jungian analyst Marion Woodman in her interview with Daniela Seif, confronting the Death Mother. As the Death Mother's target, the child eventually develops the conviction that she is living in a dangerous world and her life is constantly at risk. Long after leaving her family home, the child is haunted by the Death Mother, who campaigns against her from the inside out, in the bones. So the bones are being kind of tainted by that experience. The Death Mother is a paralytic energy that dismisses your creativity and demands your silence. She feeds on your shame and powerlessness and is provoked by any show of emotion. So the story in this one is kind of how the Death Mother gets taken on in a role by the child who doesn't trust anyone and doesn't believe in anyone as a result of their own experiences. That is not what we are seeking to evoke here, but it is part of the story. Rejection is part of the story of the Bone Mother. The Bone Mother is often perceived as terrifying, frightening, associated with death and loss and pain. In the Celtic or Irish stories of Morrigan, of Bive embodies some of this bone goddess energy. There is an energy within this candle and within this sort of temple matrix, not only of death and embalming and like the processes of death as they are in the world, but also as they are within us. And the image comes clearly of crows and other carrion birds picking clean corpses at the battlefield, which was something to our ancestors that they knew of, that they would see, that there was part of their reality. It's not mostly a part of ours. Death happens elsewhere, we are separated from it, and thus we are separated from the Bone Mother and that energy. So interwoven here is respect and honouring death energy, but also honouring and respecting the death cycles within ourselves. If you've been with me for any length of time, you know that many times over the years I've talked about death cycles. It was a good 10 plus years ago that I first spoke of it, and each time I experience a death cycle and a grieving cycle, I come to a new understanding of what it means to walk alongside death, to priestess alongside goddesses who are of death and life. The two are not separate in the way that a lot of diatribe makes it out to be. Instead, They are woven together, much like the red thread around the bone, one existing within us at the same time as the other exists within us. And as we move through life and move through death cycles, we shed our skins and die and are reborn time and time again, and it can be quite painful. I've talked about it in terms of death of a woods witch. That's as a part of my personal practice, because a lot of my personal practice is very druidic in nature, tied to sacred groves, Celtic witchcraft, things like that. So that's how I see the sacrificial moment. I see it as a stone altar in a sacred grove, but others see it as a cave in the desert. And that's the La Loba story, and having the witch who sings over the bones and brings you back is the same as the woods witch in the imagery that I receive when I work through a meditative journey-like state. So why would you work with these energies? Because death is a part of life, and grieving is a wound that can bleed us out. Grief is a strange thing to love, to lose, and to learn to love again. Grief at the absence of someone you respected or loved or appreciated or needed in your life is a strange, strange thing. And in the very harrowing but very real moments, it becomes very clear about energies of truth, truthfulness and authenticity. When it's clean to the bones, you can't hide any longer. When the bones are on show, it's the truth of it, it's the nitty-gritty of the situation and yourself, your soul work, your journey. Some things move in silence, and some things speak, some things sing and howl and take over. Whilst this was initially a requested spell energy, a requested spell set, it's very important to me, this energy. It weaves into Bive energies, and Bive for me is always about remembrance. The currency of life force is remembrance, is memory. The reason we are here is to feed memories back to the higher self, or the soul nexus is what I call it, and to experience all that there is. And so much of New Agey spirituality is to avoid the pain, or to mislabel it, or to make it out that it is not necessary, and you know. And we don't want to live in pain. We don't want to be stuck there, because it's just a cycle. And the Death Mother teaches us that death and life exist within one another, and rebirth is inevitable. We don't want to get stuck in grieving, but we cannot pretend it does not exist. In all of its emotional states, with all the rage, with all the sadness, with all the hopelessness and despair, if we do not work through our shadow and heal through our shadow, we become stuck. And as witches, as spiritual folk, or however we want to label ourselves, being stuck is not in our natural state. Our natural state is movement through each stage, experiencing it as we go, and finding the magic in all of it. Many blessings, my darlings. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.